Everybody know everybody in the room? Yes, say yes? Yeah. Remember, when I ask a question, you have to answer or I don't know the answer. So, does everybody know each other in the room? Yes. Yeah. No need for introductions. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me. This room is odd. As you probably already figured out, there's an echo in this room. And so if you have a little bit of a hearing issue, it can be very difficult. If you can't hear me at any time, tell me you can't hear me. I won't know unless you tell me. Okay? Everybody good? Say yes? Yes. All right. We're going to do two things today. Two things. Listen up. Two things. We're going to do two things today. The first thing we're going to do is something that's necessary for you folks to get reimbursed. Many of you have been through defensive driver training before, so they're making the obvious question, why do we need to do this again? Part of it is because it's actually necessary for you to get your funding reimbursement. In other words, you've got to be a certified defensive driving instructor for these folks to be able to bill the various agencies that fund you, including like non-emergency medical transportation, those types of things. So that's why we do it. The second part we're going to do, though, is on COVID-19. And as Doug was alluding to, everybody has issues. Guys, I can't compete with everybody in the room. Everybody has questions and issues around this thing, this pandemic called COVID-19. And it's no secret people have opinions about it. Does anybody in here have any opinions about COVID-19? Yeah, y'all do. Y'all do, right? And unfortunately, and I mean this sincerely, it's become political, and that's unfortunate. Because the two things don't connect. What does the 19 in COVID-19 stand for? What does the 19 stand for? Strength, the year. One person on radio, a well-known national celebrity, said, oh, this can't be that important. This is the 19th strain of COVID. That stands for the year. That was the year it was discovered, 2019. That's all that 19 means. Anything else you hear about the 19 is frankly made up. It's just made up. The problem is when national people say things, then it becomes repeated. Then it's on Facebook. Then it gets its own life, and then it becomes real, but it's still not real. Because the 19 simply stands for the year it was discovered, 2019. Nothing changes that. And the only reason I say that is because so much of this thing around COVID-19 is developed that way. Somebody who has a certain voice said something out loud, lots of other people then begin to say it, and that begins to appear in the media, national attention, social media, and that takes on a life of its own. What we're going to try to do today, to the best we can, is talk about what's real. And so please, and I think that's extremely important, because not only is it important for you in this room that are working during this difficult time, but y'all have families you go home to. And here's the hard truth, whether we like it, and frankly, it doesn't matter whether you believe it because it's true. 1,000 people today in the United States will die of this disease. Today. 1,000 today. 1,000 tomorrow. 1,000 on a Monday. That's how many people are going to die of this disease. And it really doesn't matter whether you believe that or not. That's just simply a fact. Like COVID-19, the 19 means year 2019. In New York City, during the months of January, February, March, and April, the death count went up by 60%. In other words, they know how many people should die in New York in January, February, March, and April. This year, it was 60% higher than it was in the previous year. There's only one way to account for that. And that's the obvious thing that we're going to be talking about. So I'd ask you to do that. And secondly, not only would I ask you to be part of the conversation today, I would ask you to share this conversation back at home. Everybody in here wants businesses to open and stay open. Everybody in here wants the kids to go back to school. Everybody. I don't care what political party belongs to or if you don't belong to a political party. We share all that in common. And that's what we're going to talk about. Things that we, the little bit of contribution we can make that more likely to happen. So stay tuned for that. But the first part we have to go back through is to begin on this idea of defensive driving. So, one of the things, those of you who know me, know that I have a real compassion for this. Why should we bother with any of this? Why should we get together on a Saturday morning and talk about something you do each and every day? It's because what you do matters. Why? Because a ride matters. Am I messing you up, Suzanne?
No,
Okay.
You're good, you're good.
What you do each day matters because a ride matters. How important is a ride to somebody, a trip with someone? How important? Remember when I started talking?
It's very important.
Very important, right? Why do we say that? Because how important is it to you? How important is it to your family? And the answer would be obvious. Very important. In other words, living in America in 2020, my guess would be without transportation, your life, as you know, would fundamentally be changed. If I did one thing to you and your family, not take your money, not take your home, but take your personal transportation, there's probably nothing I could do that would be more devastating than that to the daily behavior of your family. If you would just take for the last week, every place you've been in the last week, whether it's been because of your job or whether it's just been because of your family, it would be shocking to you how many places, how many little things you did that you probably took for granted, as I did. You probably went to the grocery store, you probably went to a doctor, you probably visited somebody, you probably went to see your mom, you probably picked up the kids, you probably took somebody somewhere, let alone the fact is you have a job that does that as a profession, right? And every one of those trips were important to someone. You know, one day I was teaching a class up in Scranton. It was actually the night I was teaching a class in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And it's about 9 o'clock at night. If you think you don't want to be here on a Saturday morning, these poor souls had to be there from 7 to 11 o'clock at night on a weeknight, and many of them had a bus pull off at 4 to 5 a.m. the next morning, and they had to listen to it. And it's about 9 o'clock at night, and one of the gentlemen in the back of the room, I'm coming back, Suzanne. One of the gentlemen in the back of the room has his phone underneath the table. What's he doing? He's texting, right? And he can see that I can see that he's texting. But I don't say anything to him. We take a break. He comes up to me and he says, "Hey, man, sorry about that." I said, "About what?" And he smiled. He said, "You saw me texting." I said, "Yeah." I said, "No big deal." He says, "No, you don't understand. My wife was texting me." Now I'm thinking, ooh, emergency, right? Better get this guy home, right? Maybe there's something going on in the family. I said, "Oh, is there an emergency?" He says, "No, we're out of milk." And he says, yeah. He looks at me and says, "So what do I go back and say, hey, I'm working, you go get the milk. The kids need milk, you go get the milk." I said, "Who's going to get the milk?" He said, "I am." And I said, "Do you mind if I share that story?" And he said, "No, not at all. That's why I can share it with you." And the reason I wanted to share that story with them and with you was to ask the obvious question. What do some people do when they run out of milk at 9 o'clock?
They wait.
They wait. They do without it. Now that may seem like no big thing, but I'll guarantee you nobody in this room does without it. Now you may say, "Oh crap, I don't want to go, it's dark, it's cold, it's hot, it's warm, I'm tired." You may not want to go, but at least you have the right to make that choice. Many of the people you transport don't have that liberty. In other words, they wait. There are people you dropped off, 4 people you dropped off last Friday afternoon at their home, wherever their last stop was, and do you know that you're going to be the last person they talk to? Because you probably pick them up next week. That's hard for many of us to understand how important right is, let alone the fact that it connects us to places, it creates opportunity for us, it's infrastructure for people. You know, you can have the best medical facility 3 miles from your home. You can have a great doctor, a great shopping center, a great senior center, right? It's only 3 miles from your home, but how far is it if you can't get there? How far is it if you're 85 years old and you use a walker and you go to the park? How far away is it? How far away is it?
Long ways.
It's a long way, right? It's almost an impossible way. So don't ever forget what you do matters to people, and that's why they have such a strong opinion about it. Have you ever had this experience of being 10 minutes late to pick somebody up? Bet y'all have, right? What do they say when you open up the door? What do they say to you when you're 10 minutes late and you open up the door? Where you been, right? And you'd like to explain to them where you've been. You'd like to explain to them why you're 10 minutes late. Because you know what you've gone through to get there that 10 minutes late, right? Traffic, weather, having a bus ready, whatever the case may be, a schedule that maybe you don't think is perfect. You'd like to explain to them, but try to look at it through their eyes. What have they been doing for the last 10, 15 minutes? Where's that bus? Where's that bus? Where's that bus? Oh man, if that bus doesn't come, I don't get to that, I don't get to that farmer's equipment, I don't get to that store, I don't get to that milk, I don't go get that water, I don't get to visit my mom, I don't get to do that. It's hard to understand. How many of you ever had the experience of going to start your car in the morning and you turn the key, or now maybe you just push it with your thumb, right? And it doesn't start. Everybody ever had that experience?
Yeah.
What do you do when you have that experience? Cuss? I think swearing and blaming others is particularly effective in those conditions. And you don't know what I'm talking about. You panic, right? A lot of people you transport feel like that all the time. That feeling you had when you turn that key and nothing happened. Oh crap, I left the light on, right? That feeling of how am I going to get going? I got to get this car jumped or this truck jumped. That feeling you're having of anxiousness and nervousness, that person looking at their watch saying, where's that bus? Where's that bus? That's what they're feeling. That's why they say you're late. Where have you been? It's not personal about you. It's about what they're going through. Why? Because the ride matters to them. So we always start there. The second thing I always like to talk about is what we ask you to do each day. What we ask the men and women in this room to do each day is almost impossible. You have a very, very, very unique job. Now, at the end of today, it's no secret, those of you who've been with me before, you're going to fill out a little cheat sheet, a little evaluation of me, of this program. You can say good things, you can say bad things. That's going to be shared with these gentlemen over here. It's going to be sent to Cindy Fish down at the DOT. Maybe if I get enough bad marks, I'll invite her back, right? There's all those things we're on. But here's something I'll promise you. No matter what's on that sheet, it won't appear in tomorrow's newspaper. It won't be on tonight's news. What happens if you mess up? Could it be the lead story in tomorrow's paper? Sure can. Could it be on tonight's news? Sure can. How do I know that? Because I've seen it countless times. I'm going to share some of it with you. And if you screw up bad enough, you could be on the Today Show one. You could be on Good Morning America. You could be on the NBC Nightly News potentially tonight. How do I know that? Because I've seen that happen too. That's what I mean about your job is almost impossible. You have to do a job to a level of perfection each and every day, each and every trip, each and every hour, each and every minute. Very few people have a job like that. I don't have a job like that. I had a job like that. I used to, but I don't know if I can handle it anymore. We ask you to do something that's both difficult and particularly dangerous. Well, and I'm going to rush a little bit today because we do have some time issues and so I'm going to move along. I've shared these numbers with you before. 40,200. Anybody remember what that number means?
Yes.
That's the number of people who died in 2017 in traffic accidents. 40,200 people got up, was going about very routine things, going about their business, going to work, going shopping, going to visit their mom, going to church, and they didn't come home. That's the environment you work in. Another 4.6 million people were seriously injured in 2017. And those numbers year to year remarkably stay about the same. It might actually be down a little bit this year, thank you, COVID-19. Right? That may be the one good thing that comes out of this. But what's my point? That's your work environment. Most people go to work in an office or a shop or a store or a business. They don't work in an environment that outcomes even potentially possible. But that's where you work each and every day. There's one person in here, we can go around this room. There's one person in here that could tell me a tragic story about a loved one, a neighbor, a friend, a kid you went to school with, somebody you knew that doesn't fit into that statistic somewhere. Not one of you. Every single person in this room has been touched by those statistics. Because that's just 1 year's worth of statistics. Now, if you've been alive 67 years like me, times that by 67. The likelihood is somebody I know is in that group, because there are people I know in that group, as there are in your group. And why do we do training is because we don't want you or people you're responsible for to ever be in that group. That's why we do defensive driver training. You got a huge amount of responsibility for people. Who are you responsible for?
Everybody on the bus.
Everybody on the bus, right? That's somewhat obvious. That's an agreement we have with them, don't we, Suzanne? We say, hey, we'll come and get you, we'll take you places, and we'll do it safely. That's an agreement we have with them. How do I know that's an agreement? Because when we don't, they'll let us know. They'll let us know through lawsuits, they'll let us know through claims courts, they will let us know. So you bet we have a responsibility, but who else will be responsible?
Everybody else around us.
Everybody around us, right? All those other drivers. You ever notice new drivers in here? Did they tell you this? Did Donnie tell you this on day one? Here's the rule you need to know. Everybody wants in front of you at all times. Did they teach you that? Does anybody teach you that? Yeah, they look. That little weird that's sitting at that stop sign and sees you coming, guess what they're going to do? They're going to pull out in front of you. Why? Yeah, they don't want to be behind the bus. Just like you don't want to be behind the truck or a garbage collector or whatever the case may be, you still have responsibility because you know that they're likely to do that. You might have a tailgater who's on your behind between Moorfield and Petersburg, and you've got about 2 feet in between you, right? And you've got responsibility for that again. You've got responsibility for that teenager walking around with earbuds in, listening to his phone as they're walking around. Don't hear anything, don't see anything. We've seen a tremendous spike, a tremendous increase in pedestrian strikes in this country in the last 5 years. Why is that? That's right. That's right. Not only do we have distracted drivers, we got just distracted pedestrians. There's one wonderful video on YouTube. You can Google this. A young man walks into the side of a fire truck whose lights and siren are on. Yeah, I mean, you say, what? Now, everybody knows what a fire truck is, right? When you hear it, you see it, you know what it is. Lights are flashing, siren is blowing. Boom, right into the side of the fire. I'm not making that up. That shows you how distracted people can be. And we got responsibility for them. But we also got responsibility for who else? Us, you. Some of your families want you to come home. Some of your families. I'm serious about that. You know, you have a responsibility to your family, to your loved ones, to your kids, to your spouse. Take that home at the end of the day. And I often say to drivers, if there was one thing you could get out of this class, just one thing that you can remember, it would be this. As you're doing this job each day, you gotta have a tape that plays in your head. And it goes something like this. I wanna go home. I wanna be safe. I wanna enjoy my evening. I wanna go home. I wanna be safe. I wanna enjoy my evening. And that tailgater's not taking that from you. And that kid that just walked out in front of me is not taking that from you. And that senior that wants to gas too much in front of that bus is not taking that from you. I want to go home, I want to be safe, I want to enjoy my evening. I have found that drivers who are willing to do that, who are willing to say, I'll take that on, are the ones who enjoy this work. But I'll be just as honest with you. Drivers that want to be in constant conflict with everything, about everything, whether it's that tailgater, whether it's that car that pulls out in front of you, whether that's person that talks too much, frankly, doesn't go home and enjoy their evening. They may get through the day, but they don't enjoy their evening. They're taking this home with them. And then they're taking it back to work with them the next day. I challenge you, the next time you find the stress beginning to grow, you find yourself getting angry at somebody or something, play that tape. I want to go home, I want to be safe, I want to enjoy my evening. That's an important thing. We are safety sensitive. That's why we drug and alcohol test you. And I often say to people, you know, when you think about it, go home tonight and ask your sweetie if they're drug and alcohol. Ask your friends, ask your neighbors. What you're going to find out is they're not. Now, there may be a few of them, depending on the nature of their job, but what mandates that? What mandates that by law is the fact that you're called, quote, safety sensitive. What does that mean? That means the safety, the lives of others is under your control. There's very few people who can say that about their job. A person who works in a hardware store can't say the safety of others is under my control. A person who works at the supermarket can't say that, but you have to say that. Why? Because it's true. The safety of others is under your control. You're the person driving that bus, fixing that bus. It is under your control. That's really important to remember that. We use public funds. Do people care about public funds? I've told this story way too many times. I know many of you in the room have heard it, but it always strikes me as one of the most interesting experiences I've had in my life. I'm at the giant eagle supermarket at home. I get out of my car. I start walking toward the front door and a bus pulls to the parking lot. The woman happens to recognize me, the bus driver. She looks in her mirror, nobody calling me in. She stops the bus, taps the horn so that I can come up and say hello to her. And that's literally what I do. I walk up to this house and say, hey, how are you doing? Good. How are you doing? How's the family? Good. Gotta go. Right? Gotta go, right? She looks at why she gotta go. She's on schedule, right? And so we don't talk 20, 30 seconds max. I go into the supermarket, I grab my body, I really wasn't paying attention. I go to start through the second door, and a guy standing at the window turns to me and goes, hey, pal, you know they make $20 an hour. Now, first thing, I'm not sure he's my pal. And secondly, I have no idea how much they need. Why the heck did I say that? What was he going to say?
He's holding her up.
Why does he care if I'm holding her up?
Spending my tax money.
Because you're spending my money. That's what we got to understand. When you work in a public sector job, people have a very different opinion. I would not be telling you that story if that was a truck that said Gibbs Plumbing on the side. Because that story wouldn't happen. But the fact, these people weren't riders of us, by the way. But it was still their money. You're watched differently. When you're going up and down the highways and byways of this community and this area with Potomac Valley Transit on the side, with your phone number, with your website, everybody's watching you. Everybody's making note. And now you compound that with the use of social media. You know, back in the days when I was driving a bus, when dinosaurs were still on the earth, you know, if somebody got mad at me, think about what they had to do. They had to go home 2 hours later. They had to still be mad. They had to get a phone book out. Find the name of the company. Call the organization to file a complaint. What do people do now? What am I doing? Why am I holding this? Who am I going to tell about this event that just happened? This driver was just rude. Everybody, right? I may not even call these guys. I may never tell them, but I may tell everybody who's my Facebook friend. I may tell everybody who I'm connected to in some way, or maybe even better yet, I may make a video of it, or an audio recording of it, and I may put it on YouTube. And how do I know that happens? Because I would challenge you to go to YouTube and put the word bus driver in. You might find one of your own in there. And put whatever words you want in front of the word bus driver. Crazy bus driver, out of control bus driver, swearing bus driver, rude bus driver, smoking bus driver, sleeping bus driver. Put anything you want in front of that word and see what shows up. And who authorized those videos? No one. That's who authorized those videos, literally no one. What's my point is now how people communicate is so different than how it was only a few years ago. And this is very generational. Young people in this room get this. Frankly, older people in this room, and I include myself, don't get it here. Because we don't do it here. We don't understand that for many people, I was looking at something, I was staying at a hotel one time, this wasn't too long ago, pre-COVID, and I didn't know this area, I didn't know this hotel, and there's always reviews, right? So I go on the reviews, some of them good, some of them not so good, but I noticed there was a number next to this guy's name, one of the guys that did the review. And there was this little wee number that said 614. Anybody know what that means?
614 reviews.
Say it out loud.
614 reviews.
Yeah, they had written, this one gentleman had written 614 reviews about organizations and businesses. Think about that for just a moment. In other words, he goes into a supermarket and buys an orange. He writes a review about it. He stops at a sheep. He writes a review about it. He rides a bus. He writes a review about it. That's just what he does. That's the work environment we're in. This difficult, dangerous environment with things that can go very bad, with a huge amount of responsibility. You're under a special, special class called safety sensitive. Everybody's using public funds. So everybody's looking at us very, very differently, and now they're telling the world. I often ask people this: do you have cameras on your buses? How many? Donnie, how many cameras on your bus?
There are 6 cameras.
There's 6 cameras that the company put up. And how many cameras are on the buses? Why am I holding this up? Yeah, everybody's a camera. Everybody's a video reporter. Watch the nightly news tonight. Watch any, and I don't care which right or left station you prefer. Watch the videos from them. What you're going to notice is most of the video now doesn't come from NBC, CBS, CNN, ABC. They don't come from that. Where's the video come from? During these riots recently, the one thing, any of those videos you saw the riots, you saw about 600 people standing in front of them doing this. What were they doing this? What was everybody doing? Recording. Everybody was recording it. This terrible thing that just happened in Minneapolis. Why do we know about it? Because a 17-year-old girl recorded it. That's how we know about it. And she stood there the entire time asking me to take that officer to take his video off. That's what we said. Did you ever hear her say that? A 17-year-old girl is the reason we know about that, because she had one of these in her pocket and she pulled it out. That's the work environment. Difficult, dangerous, but I also think the right people are doing it because you care about people. Quality of life, right? Now, we're going to be talking about safety, so we always got to think in terms of, okay, what causes actions? Well, we know there are 4 root causes of actions. If somebody's tired, hurried, distracted, or bored. Complacency is another word we use for bored. Those four things routinely are what's sort of behind what we refer to as root causes of accident. You know, often after an accident, you got to do an accident report, how fast, drawing of the intersection maybe you're in, how many vehicles are involved, all that type of stuff. But behind all that data is usually one of these four or a combination of any number of these four events are taking place. Because if you're tired, what happens when you're tired? What happens to you? Well, here's what the expert tells us happens. Your ability to perceive things and your ability to process things elongates. You ever been really tired at night and you're watching something on TV and you can't really follow the script? That's because your ability to perceive and your ability to sort of take information in and make sense of it has been affected. Well, the same thing happens when you're driving. You know, the tail lights come on in front of you, the brake lights come on, but you don't see them. You see them, but your brain doesn't instantly say, those are brake lights, I need to hit my brake. There's a gap in time. And then your reaction time gets slowed down. So if you're tired, bad things happen. If you're in a hurry, speed not appropriate to task. We've all made that mistake. Oh, we're late, we're in a hurry, we rush. The likelihood of an accident greatly increases. If we're distracted, multiple thoughts in our heads, multiple activities in our hands. That's why these things cause so much damage up the highways. Why these things cause so much damage in the hands of pedestrians. Because we don't multitask very well. We do things rapidly, but we don't multitask. It's almost impossible to simultaneously be doing two things at the same time. It's a very hard thing to do. And finally, if we're bored or complacent, we've done something over and over and over again. How many of you have bad habits? Anybody in the room have bad habits? Besides me. Anybody else? Anybody else? Why do you have them? Because you get away with them. There's no negative repercussions from doing them in the moment. I eat all the wrong foods. I don't exercise. I don't do this. I don't do that. No, nothing bad happens to me. Of course, we all know long term something does. But in the same thing with people who speed or tailgate or don't use their turn signals or frankly don't do a good pre-trip inspection or don't properly secure a mobility device. Nothing bad happens. It conditions the mind to think, oh, I guess I'm okay. And you're not. Because inevitably, these things line up. The right set of events will line up and then something bad will happen. And that's where boredom comes in. You've seen this video before. But here's a video that takes all four of these, I would argue, and in one story encapsulates them all. This is a bus driver at a transit system called SMART, which is outside the city of Detroit. And some of you have seen this video before, but this is the news story. Remember what I said earlier? If you screw up, you can be the lead story on the nightly news. Here's an example of the lead story on the local nightly news.
News at 6, you know, that flat rock in the middle of rush hour caused several injuries, some of them critical.
And today, an Oakland County judge sentenced that driver of the bus to jail. Sean Lay was in the courtroom. Sean joins us now live. Sean, was he taken into custody right away?
Right away, 93 days in jail. The driver apologized for the accident, calling it an accident, but the judge says, after she looked at the case, he says this was absolutely no accident. Local 4 first breaking the story of the sleeping smart bus driver last fall. 66-year-old Leon Rashid admitted he dozed off during rush hour traffic behind the wheel of his smart bus. Onboard cameras capturing the chaos of that bus slamming into 8 cars in West Bloomfield at Maple near Middlebelt, injuring several people and critically injuring an elderly couple. Rashid pleaded no contest to a move-in violation, and at his sentencing today, he apologized over and over.
I pray for him every day, truly. And so I pray that they do well every day. So I feel bad about it. I mean, it's been a hell of a thing to go through, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'm sorry it happened to the people.
But Judge Kimberly Small says this was no accident. She calls it gross negligence. She revealed new information about the smart bus driver, that Rashid has 8 previous accidents on his record. 7 of them were his fault. That he told investigators that he was tired the moment he got up that day. She says Rashid should have never been behind the wheel of a smart bus and ordered Rashid to go directly to jail.
You fell asleep because you were tired. You caused an 8-car crash, nearly killing 2 people. And but for the grace of God, they're still alive.
Back here live, we just got off the phone with Smart Bus officials asking about those previous accidents. They say that Rashid, behind the wheel of one of their buses, was involved in at least 7 accidents and moving violations, but they all were considered minor, not enough for Smart to take him off the road before the big accident. Carmen and Steve.
You know, every time you see that video, you're just amazed that no one was killed. Sean, do we know how the victims are doing?
You know, not good. A lot of injuries here. Some people are having like post-traumatic stress over having the bus slam into them. The people hurt the most were an elderly couple, a broken neck suffered by one member of the couple. Another person there had a broken pelvis. They're still recovering today.
Well, you can imagine. All right, our Sean Lay reporting for us live.
So if you go back to before, now, I would say something to people when I showed that video. Is that a bad person? Is Mr. Rashid a bad man? Do you think he got up that morning to be a pen of hurting people? Do you think that's what he decided to do when he went to work? No. I think anybody in the room would say that. You know, he's an older gentleman, about my age, to be frank. Probably has been doing this for countless years. Thousands and thousands of trips, thousands and thousands of people that he's picked up safely, transported them safely. But that day, these 4 things would have lined up to him. Him being tired by his own admission, falling asleep, him perhaps being in a hurry toward the end of the workday, which is not uncommon. Most accidents, in fact, do happen toward your last trip, toward the end of the workday. That's a very common occurrence. We see it all the time. Perhaps he was distracted, not maybe looking at something, but distracted in here, thinking about something, right? Obviously not awake, and then being bored or complacent. How many times do you think he's driven through that intersection? Countless times. But that day traffic is stopped. And all those things sort of lined up. And as I said, if something bad happens, the world doesn't just say, oh, we understand. Yeah, you probably didn't get enough sleep last night. That's fine. We understand. No, they don't. You heard what that judge said. Right? That was irresponsible. That was wrong. You're going to be held accountable for it. He went to jail. Because of that. Why? Because when a vehicle is used in a certain way, you can have charges brought against you that are different. It's called vehicular homicide. If somebody died. Now, nobody died in this case. What would have been much worse? One person did break their neck, another person did break their pelvis. Think about those people. Right now, those people are still living hour by hour, moment by moment, day by day with the repercussions of that accident. His 63 days in jail may have sounded harsh. He got out. Those people didn't get out. That's the job we got to do each and every day. So that's why we take a little bit of time to remind you, for the most part, about defensive driving. So let's look at something that we already talked about, which is your Zonar, which amounts to your pre-trip, right? Why is a pre-trip important? By the way, if you're following along in the book, what page am I on? Page 2? Yeah, page 2. Vehicle safety video. If you want to take any notes or anything. Why is a pre-trip important? What are you saying when you do a pre-trip?
The bus is safe.
The bus is safe. How do you know it's safe? How do you know it's safe? Because I inspected it. I understand what you were saying when you hit that send button on that Zonar. You're saying 2 things. You're saying, I've inspected this stuff. I've really looked at it. And I've made a decision that it's safe. That's a heck of a piece of, a lot of pressure on you each and every day. And how do I know that? Because I've seen court cases. I've been expert witnesses in court cases that happen. And typically in a court case, they go through a thing called discovery, in which both parties can ask for information from the other party as part of their case. And almost always, you know what they ask for first? 6 months worth of pre-trip for you, the individual. Why do they want 6 months? Why not just that day? What are they looking for?
Show routine.
Routine, patterns, trends, lack of routine, lack of patterns. So this stuff not only is important for the obvious reason, you're saying bus is safe today, it actually becomes something much bigger than that if something bad happens. And so don't ever take for granted. And here's the truth. I'm going to be very honest with you. I was a bus driver, so I say this as your peer. If you're going to violate one thing, that may be the one thing you violate. Because it's easy. Why might you not do a good preacher? What motivates you not to do a good preacher? You're in a hurry. That's obvious, right? You're in a hurry. Better I get out there and pick these people up than being 10 minutes late, someone open up that door and they say, you're right. Right? So we start there. Why else? Why else are we not doing it? Weather. Weather can get in our way. It's going to be miserable walking around that bus. Lazy might get in our way. But you know what I would say gets in our way? That last thing, complacency. Hey, I just drove that bus last night. I just parked at 4 o'clock last night. Been sitting in the garage all night. I don't think anything really happened. Hey, I didn't do a real good pre-trip last week. Nothing bad happened. All those types of things. And my guess would be most of you drove here today. And I would guess most of you did pre-trip your automobile or your truck before you got in this morning. If I had to guess. Right? If I had, you probably didn't walk around with this morning. If I had to guess. So it's not even consistent with what we normally do. So there's a whole bunch of reasons, but what I'm saying to you is, what's a little bit different about your safety-sensitive job is, you get a button that says, I did this. I looked at these things, and I made a decision that these things are safe. And there's no way of getting around that. Nobody's going to say, oh no, Donnie should have done it. Oh no, Doug should have done it. No, no. You're the person who hit the button. Like it or not, it's back on you. And so take that process a little bit more serious each morning. We're going to watch a quick little safety video about, typical process in a pre-trip. I'm not going to, again, trying to move things along. I'm not going to go item by item by item, but let's at least look at the video. Nope, it's not.
As the driver of a transit vehicle, you are on the front line of safety, both for your passengers, other drivers, pedestrians, and yourself. Before you even put the wheels on the road, you have the chance to ensure the safety of your vehicle with a thorough pre-trip inspection.
Well, maintenance can't do everything and be everywhere at all times. The driver is the one that operates the vehicle. He tends to know the nuances of individual vehicles. And so it's important that the driver is aware of what he's operating.
Our passengers mainly, we're responsible to deliver them safely to and from their destinations. And can't do that with bad equipment or bad attitude or bad anything.
A complete pre-trip inspection consists of 4 main components: the approach, under the hood, the walk-around, and on board. Remember, establishing a consistent routine is critical to quick, accurate, and thorough pre-trip inspections.
First thing, we would want to approach and look under the vehicle, see if there are any leaks, any puddles of any kind of fluid, so we know if it's low on any fluid.
Just any obvious signs of damage, flat tires, busted tail light, busted windows, obvious stuff, when you're approaching the vehicle.
If you're going to be having to back out, you want to make sure there's not another vehicle behind you.
It's just an opportunity to see if there's any showstoppers before you get into the details of the pre-trip.
We're looking for fluid levels, our transmission fluid, oil, windshield wiper fluid, radiator fluids, all of that kind of stuff you want to check to be sure you're ready for the day.
Just take a look at the hoses and the belts, make sure the belts aren't frayed or loose.
During the walk-around, the operator's priority is to check the entire exterior of the vehicle for anything that might compromise the vehicle's safety.
We'll be checking the tire tread, any damages around the bus. Then get up in there and try to look at it, make sure the suspension looks good, no cracks, no breaks.
Also want to just take a look at the tires and wheels and lug nuts, make sure that the tires are properly inflated, that all the lug nuts are tight. We check each one of those by hand.
Well, inside the bus, the driver controls, steering, horn, lighting, turn signals.
Make sure I got, again, the safety equipment, fire extinguisher, first aid kit, flares, safety triangles, bloodborne pathogen kit, gloves.
Seatbelt cutter, especially if we have a passenger in a wheelchair on board. The fastest way to evacuate them is to cut all the tie-down straps.
Also want to make sure all the wheelchair tie downs are in place and make sure all the seats are down, the seat belts are functional.
That's the safety side of it at least, and then of course you're also looking at the cleanliness issues and making sure your windows and mirrors and so forth are clean, and clean floors, nothing that they're going to slip on or fall on.
The pre-trip inspection, of course, is just the beginning. During your entire trip, be sure to remain aware of your vehicle, using all of your senses to look for signs of trouble. After your trip, be sure to perform a post-trip inspection of your vehicle according to your agency's protocols.
We just want to make sure that we can provide the safest, most comfortable ride we can, but also we want to make sure that we maintain the vehicles so they're in safe operating condition and we keep our maintenance at a minimum.
There's a bunch of reasons we do a pre-trip, but what's important is to remember nobody else can do it for you. I mean, that's just the nature of it, that you're signing that form in many cases. In your case, you're hitting that button that says, send. That says, I did these things. I walked around. I checked the things that were blocked out there, the things that I said I did. And if you don't know how to check one of those things, one of the strange behaviors us human beings have is we'll pretend to know how to do something we don't know how to do. It's really a rather remarkable thing. No kid would ever do that. But we adults will do it all the time. You ever had this experience? You ever been in the supermarket and somebody walks up to you and they obviously know you, but you're not quite sure who they are, and you don't know them, but you pretend you know them? Has anybody ever done that besides me? Has anybody besides me ever done that? Yeah. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? Embarrassed. We'd be embarrassed, right? We'd be embarrassed. I think it's the same reason people don't ask. I don't really know. It says check tires, or check under the hood, or check belts, or check this fluid, or check this, or check that. I really don't know exactly what that means, but I do check it, right? I don't put one tire, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yeah, there's 6 of them on there. No, that's not what it means, right? What's my point is, don't ever do that. And everybody when that's happened, when you've done that with somebody, when they walk away and your sweetie says, who is that? You go, then you're embarrassed because why don't we have the courage to say, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Oh yeah, I'm John. Remember we went to school together? Oh yeah, now I'm beginning to get it right. But it is odd how we will do that, and I think that same thing really does apply here. So I challenge you, if you don't know what that means, then go to one of these folks and ask, or go to a coworker and ask them what that means. That's the sign of an intelligent person, not pretending that you know what something means. We talked a little bit about documentation. That's what Doug was talking about up front, how important that is, and that's what that does. That record that creates with sonar, that's creating a record for that vehicle, for everything for PM, for maintenance, for longevity of the vehicle, for safety of the vehicle, for assurance that the vehicle was inspected. All those things are being documented when you send that. We want to report also that communicate. If there is something wrong in that bus, we've got to communicate there's something wrong in that bus. And some of you may say, I tell them all the time, and they don't ever fix anything. Well, sometimes they make a decision about when to fix it. You may have something that you're right, that you've written up a few times, and you look at it and it's not changed. But maybe maintenance says, you know what, that's not a safety issue. We will repair that when it's brought in for PM. That's what we mean by communication. That it's not that you're being ignored, but they're making a different decision about that thing. And it's okay for you to go and say, hey man, I keep writing this up. Why isn't that being done? Oh, we're going to do that when it's brought in on a 2,000 or 5,000 mile cycle. That's when we're going to do that. Have those conversations. One of the other things they talked about was this stuff, emergency basics. The problem with emergencies is they're emergencies. And by nature, what that word means is they weren't expected. So the problem is if we're going to prepare for an emergency, we have to do it without actually expecting it. And again, being human beings, we don't tend to do that. Because nothing's going to happen. We've done this 10,000 times before and nothing bad happened. So therefore, there's a good reason not to do something, at least in our own head. Like checking the fire extinguisher, making sure it's charged, opening the first aid kit, the biohazard kit, making sure you have a seatbelt cutter, making sure you have those reflective triangles. These first 5 things are required on all buses in the United States. You actually could be cited for not having those 5 things on your bus. But then on top of that, there are other things. Might be a flashlight for doing an inspection. Might be making sure that you have the jack handle You know what I mean by the jack handle for the lift, right? So that you can get somebody out of that vehicle even if you lost power on the lift. There's nothing in your pocket or your purse that's going to duplicate that jack handle. And then some people are requiring safety vests. So it's your job to make sure you have these things. And you can't wait until the accident happens and then find out you don't have a charged fire extinguisher, or there's nothing in your first aid kit. And let me tell you, as you're going to see when we get into code a little bit later, personal protection equipment in that home should be on that list. Whether that's a mask, whether that's gloves, whether that's disinfectant, those things that are going to lessen the likelihood of something bad happening need to be added to that list now. And they're probably not on your list because it's written in the past. That's going to have to be taken. Throughout your shift, look, listen, smell, feel. That's what you're doing all day long. Things happen over the course of the day, using a vehicle, driving a vehicle, stopping, starting, all those types of things. You may have done a great pre-trip in the morning, vehicle was fine, but as the day wore on, something wasn't working right. When you come in that evening, you have a responsibility to report that. So that they can maybe get it fixed, so the next day when you go back out, that's been addressed. And so don't forget that. It's not just drop your bus off and run home. If something's changed in that vehicle over the course of that day, you have an obligation and responsibility to report that back to management. They talked about the 4 steps in a pre-trip: the approach, under the hood, the walk around on board. And again, I could spend time in each one of those, and I'm not going to do that today. But I particularly want to take a moment under the hood. Are you expected to look under the hood? Yes. Yes, you are. And there are things under the hood that are dangerous. There are things under the hood that can cut your fingers off if you don't know what you're doing. And again, what I'm trying to get to is, now Donnie, when they do an inspection under the hood, the engine's off. Okay, the engine should be off. That's a good starting point. You know that, right? However, if on there it says check transmission fluid, guess what you can't do? Check transmission fluid with the engine off, because that's not the way the system works. So those are the kinds of things. Now, I don't know if they're expected to check transmission fluid.
Normally they're not.
Okay. Under normal conditions, they are. The other thing about under the hood is the more rural your service is, which is everybody in this room now, right? The more likely all this stuff matters. To be very frank with you, if I drive in downtown Pittsburgh and my bus breaks down on Main Street or Fifth Avenue in downtown Pittsburgh, you're going to get me another bus in about 3 minutes. If you break down 26 miles from where we're standing, how long is it going to take you? An hour and a half, right? You're going to be with those people who aren't going to be happy for an hour and a half. You know what I'm saying? So take this process serious. And the other thing is, just one final thing is, this is your chance to really adjust mirrors. Drives me crazy as I see people, if I had the tallest and the shortest person in this room stand up next to each other, you'd see there's quite a distance in height between different people in this room. I always remember one time I was teaching a class like this in Philadelphia, and this young lady stood up, we were talking about this, about adjusting mirrors, and she stood right to the back of the room. I said, yes ma'am, do you have a question? She said, I do. I said, do you mind standing up and addressing the crowd? And she stood up, and honestly, I just went like this. She was 6'6" tall, skinny as a rail, this woman, right? And she says, you mean to tell me that every time I get in a bus, I'm going to have to adjust the mirrors? Yeah. And she turns to everybody and says, see? And she sits back down and everybody laughs. We take a break, and I said, can I talk to you for a moment? I said, what was that about? She says, well, I'll tell you what it's about. You might have noticed I'm tall. I said, it did. She said, well, of course, I have to adjust the mirrors. And guess what? Everybody gets mad. The mechanics get mad. The other drivers get mad. Everybody gets mad at me. They tell me don't adjust the mirrors. Because then I got to drive the bus, and then I got to adjust them. You get what I'm going with that? Why do you adjust the mirrors? What are you trying to do? See better, reduce blind spots, right? And everything about adjusting mirrors, we've learned. Most of you, when you were a kid, your pappy or grandpappy or mama or somebody wanted to turn those mirrors in and down so you can see the back of the vehicle. Let me tell you, that's not right. You want those mirrors up and out. Now, if you're in a bus rodeo, you want to do that, you want to be able to see those little cones, right? But when you're not right, what do you want to do? You want to see more. You want those mirrors up and out. Put your face up against the glass and then adjust the mirror. So that when you come back here, you can't see the side of the vehicle. What's that going to require you to do? It's going to require you to lean to get a better view of me. But what you're trying to do is see more out here. Not less out here, not the side of the vehicle, but more out here. Same thing applies to your car. Take the time to do proper mirror adjustments. And in this day and age, mirror adjustments means this, right? I mean, it's not back in the day where you had to get out and adjust the mirrors and then go down the steps and get out and adjust the mirrors. Those days are changing. By the way, just out of curiosity, you might want to know this. Probably by the time you buy your next vehicle, where do you think the mirrors are going? They're going to be down here right outside this window? Yeah, they're going to be way out front, up high. Even in new buses, I don't know if you've seen any of the newer big buses, you might notice the mirrors are on the very front, up high in the corner. Why? What's that mirror now do? See more. Yeah, you see more. And those of you, any school bus drivers in here, any old school, what do you have on your school bus? You don't have that in the way of mirrors. Crossover mirror, right? Like a crossover mirror. Why? Particularly because you're transporting smaller, shorter people. But you know how valuable that crossover mirror is. You're going to see a big improvement. Because what we've learned is one of the root causes of pedestrian strikes is we lose them. And by the way, the reason the mirror is outside right here, like right here, is back in the day, how did you adjust the mirror? You rolled down the window and restarted adjusting the mirror. That's how, so it sort of continuously stays there, when in fact it should probably be way out in the front of your body. So it's going to change over time. Okay, we're going to do a little quiz. Right, did you pass this out? You did, right? So let's get started. After the quiz, we'll take a break, because y'all look like you need one. So let's go through it together, and we'll do it real quick. Complete this sentence. Preventive driving is preventing what? Accidents, regardless of what? Well, regardless of conditions or the what? Actions of others. Defensive driving, preventing accidents regardless of conditions or what other people do. Now, this is a big deal. This is what most people driving are not doing, what you see right here. If you can just embrace it, my job as a professional driver is to prevent accidents, first and foremost, regardless of the conditions that exist and regardless of what other people do. That's a big deal. So let's say somebody's tailgating you. Let's use an obvious situation. So if somebody's tailgating you, there's a likelihood of an accident increases dramatically. What are your options if somebody's tailgating you? You did what? You're watching the movie. Okay, you hit the brake and send in a signal. That's one option. But what's that do? Does that increase or decrease the likelihood of an accident? It increases the likelihood of an accident. It also maybe makes them angry. It increases the likelihood of road rage. So we wouldn't do that as a professional driver. What might we do? Slow down. We would slow down, creating a bigger gap between us and the vehicle in front of us. Or finally, what might we do? Pull over, let that jackass around us. Part of my language. Why? Because I work at a higher standard. My job is not to teach that whatever back there how to be a good human being and how to drive. My job is to prevent accidents, regardless of the conditions or what somebody else is doing. And that's extremely important to get this. This is what we mean by defensive driving. We expect you to drive differently. Why do we want you to have a bigger cushion of safety between you and the vehicle in front of you? Because we want to prevent accidents, regardless of what's going on. Why do we want you to pull over somebody's tailgating you and you can't get rid of them? Because we want to prevent that. I would rather you're 10 seconds late because I would prevent an accident. I find myself more and more willing to do this. But there's an ego part to this. There really is. Okay, that's important. Question number 2. What is considered a safe following distance? 4 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. Why do we want to create that gap between us and anything in front of us? It's because of the next question. What are the 3 factors that determine stopping distance? P, perception. R, reaction. D, braking. Those 3 things are necessary for you to slow down or to stop a bus. You first must perceive something, meaning your eyes have to see something and your brain has to interpret what it saw. Now that may sound silly to you, but here's what happens. The brake lights come on in front of you. Your eyes see those lights get shiny. Your eyes say to your brain, hey brain, something's happening up here. These lights are turning on. The brain says, let me look that up in my files. The brain looks through its files and it discovers that means the vehicle in front of you is slowing down. It has learned that. And it says, hey, the vehicle in front of us is slowing down. We should react to it. And then the foot says, hey, thanks for involving me. I'm going to move from the throttle over to the brake. Now, I'm being silly here, but all that takes time. The more we're paying attention, the more alert we are, the more on purpose we are, the less time it takes, the more we're distracted, the more we're in a hurry, the more we're bored, the more we're... you saw that guy driving that bus, that's what happened. The brake lights were right in front of him, the brain wasn't picking up the signal. right? The body wasn't reacting to it. So that's why we want to create that following distance. The average reaction time for a human being ranges between somewhere between 3/4 of a second and a second and a half. And a lot of this depends on your age and on your ability and how much attention you're paying to things. Now, what does that mean? Let me give you an example. USA Today did a study a few years ago on the hardest thing to do in professional sports. What's the hardest thing to do? Hit a baseball. Hit a 90-mile-an-hour baseball. Why is it so hard? Because it's all about what we're talking about now, right? When you think about it, that batter, right, has to be ready. When that ball leaves the pitcher's hand, in the catcher's mitt is about 4/10 of a second. That means that batter had to make all the decisions and start the bat forward in under 2/10 of a second. That's why most can't do it. I was, remember when I was in the average reaction time is 3/4 of a second to a second and a half? We're talking 2/10 of a second. So that's why it's so hard. That's why NASCAR drivers are the people who can do that. That's why tennis players are the people who can return a 90-mile-an-hour serve. There's just not, most of us can't do those things because we don't have the perception and reaction time. But most of us have the perception and reaction time necessary to drive a vehicle. And so that's important. How do you reduce that? How do you reduce your perception and reaction time? Okay, cover your brake is one technique, right? In other words, I'm going to go through an intersection. Rather than waiting until I'm in the intersection, I slow down back here and I move my foot over the brake. Now I'm paying attention, and all I got to do is drop my foot. I've already reduced that time dramatically. The easiest way to say it, though, is just paying attention. In other words, if I do this, why don't we want you looking at your phone? Because let's just say I'm not using my phone, but if it vibrates or rings, I'm going to look at it. So I'm driving, right? My phone vibrates. What am I doing there? What am I doing? What am I not doing? Right, if I'm looking at this, what's happening is time's being lost, right? As that time's being lost, I continue to move forward. And just give an example of moving forward. I always think this is really dramatic. Suzanne, you're gonna, oh, you can't help me. You're going to go down. Donnie, come and help me. Now, I want Donnie to start walking to that wall. Just to that wall in the back. Donnie's good at this part. He's really good at this. Have you noticed that? So we're going 65 miles an hour. We're driving 65 miles an hour. Everybody see where Donnie is? Now, in 1 second, I would travel at least from here to Donnie. Yes, no, maybe. Well, in 1 second, I would need at least 2 times the distance that Donnie and I are apart. Every second at 65 miles an hour, we're traveling about 100 feet. It's 1.5 times miles per hour, so 97.5 feet to be exact. So think about that. Every second you're driving, whatever speed you're going, so if I'm going 30 miles an hour, I cover 50 feet, 1.5. Okay, everybody with me? So what that means is when I look down at my phone for a second, I go twice the distance between me and Donnie at 65 miles an hour in 1 second. Anything between me and Donnie, or double me and Donnie, I just hit. And there's nothing I can do about it because I was here in that moment. That's why, yes, we can reduce. Thank you, Donnie. Wild round of applause for my trusted assistant. Great job.
What do you guys do about lunch?
I'll tell you a funny story about doing this one time. I was in Discovery Channel and we were outside doing this training. So I really wanted to go out the whole 100 feet, right? So I go out the whole 100 feet to demonstrate to people how much of a distance there is in 1 second. You know, and ooh, right? Hopefully you'll remember that when you're driving. That's why you don't want to look away for a second. Meanwhile, a bus comes out of the garage, and I say, oh, come on, and I say to the guy over there, drop the line. Well, he does, but the bus back wheel picks it up, and this is going down the road now behind them. So that they weren't real happy with me at Frederick Training. Okay, let's move on. How far ahead should you be looking? What the expert tells us, in the city, about a block to a block and a half, which is about 12 to 15 seconds ahead. Now, I want you to think about this concept. In other words, if I'm tailgating, what am I looking at? When you're tailgating somebody, what are you watching? You're watching the back of their vehicle. You're watching essentially their brake lights, right? That's why I want to be back 4 seconds, because if I'm back 4 seconds, what do I have to do? Look in front of it. right? I'm scanning ahead of blind spots. Now I see a car's brake lights coming on 3 cars in front of that vehicle in front of me. I'm reacting to it long before I get right up against that car. Right, when I see a car pulling out. So in town or in the city, it's about a block to a block and a half. In the country or out on the highway, it's about a quarter of a mile, which is about 10 to 12 seconds. So I want to have a 4-second following distance between me and the vehicle in front of me, and I want to be thinking 10 seconds in front of that. So when you're driving home tonight, just try that. In other words, pick a spot when you're driving, and see, look ahead and say, okay, let me count until I get to that spot. If you get to about 12 seconds, you're fine. Also, when you're driving, the car in front of you or the truck in front of you, when it crosses a small point, a pole, a post, a sign, start counting 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, 1,004. Now, that may seem silly. I really think when you're driving a bus, you're not counting every few seconds. But as you begin to recognize what that distance is, you won't feel the need to count. You'll begin to recognize that. But all of a sudden, you're counting 1,001. I'm already 2 spots. I'm only a second and a half behind that car. If I lose a second of attention, I'm going to travel that distance Ronnie and I were just demonstrating to you, and anything in that distance I'm going to hit. If Bambi comes running out, I'm going to hit Bambi. There's no way around it. So give some thought to that. Okay. Where are the blind spots on the bus you drive? Where are some of the obvious blind spots around your vehicle? Okay, side, rear particularly. You're very limited directly behind your vehicle. You're limited somewhat on the side. Any place else? Directly in front of the vehicle. That's why the school buses have the crossover mirror. But here's one place maybe you haven't thought about. And we see a lot of pedestrian strikes. And these are what they call body on chassis. That's what you drive. In other words, the chassis is built by one company, typically Ford or some other company, and the chassis is built by a body company, right? And there's a curve in the front of your bus, right? Everybody know what I'm talking about? Because the hood was only this wide, but the body's this wide, so they had to curve the metal. Right at your right side, there's a blind spot. And what we see is a lot of pedestrian strikes in that blind spot. You know that little triangle window you have down there? That's why it's there. Don't cover it up with stuff. That's typically where we throw all our crap. In fact, we may even mount the fire extinguisher right in front of it. That's not uncommon to do. But there's a reason for that window there. So be extremely careful if you're at a stop sign or a red light, and now you're going to make a right turn or even a left turn. Recognize there's a blind spot right at the front corner of your vehicle. How can you reduce blind spots? Okay, moving your seat, what they call rocking and rolling. If you've ever taken a system called Smith's system of driving, you don't drive like this. You move your head left, right, so it changes then your angles of what you can see, right? And also positive. Little things like if you're behind the car at a red light and then your light turns green, what do? Pause for a second. Don't just hit the throttle because they hit the throttle. Pause for a second. That way, if anything moves, I'm going to see it when it moves. So there are a number of things you can do to reduce blind spots. The most thing is, and also adjusting the mirrors. How far ahead before a turn should you signal? When you're driving, how far before you turn should you signal? 300 feet. Well, the experts say in the book, 150 feet. I believe, now I have to check your manual here in West Virginia, but that's pretty good. 100 to 150 feet. However, is that always the right thing to do? Why do we use signals? What's the purpose of signals? To let other people know what we're doing, not to let us know what we're doing. We get confused about this. Oh, I'm going to turn at that next block, so I put my right turn signal on 2 blocks back here. What's the problem with that? You got 50 people trying to pull out. Right, I've got all these openings, driveways, stores, whatever, even other streets. They're seeing that turn signal. What might they think I'm doing? Turning there. So they pull right out in front of me. We see that type of accident all the time. So yes, we want to put our signal on well ahead, but we also want to take into account getting the right information. So if I'm going past a shopping center with 4 openings in it, I might not put my turn signal on until I'm only 45 feet from that intersection because I need to clear those openings first. And even though the book says, I should put it now. If you're on the highway, next exit, put it on 300 feet ahead. Because you know you're getting off that exit and there's nothing in between you and them. You want to give the best information to people. You should avoid backing whenever possible. However, when you must back, what are some of the safety considerations to keep in mind? Use a spotter. Use a spotter. What else? What else can you do to prevent backing? Get out and look. Right? Use a spotter, get out and look. Blow your horn, roll down your windows. Why? We often say, I say this a lot, I apologize if it offends anybody. We teach backing safety as we teach sex education. We do it the same way with the kids. We say, don't do that, but if you do that, do this. Sort of how we teach backing safety, right? Don't back up, don't back up, don't back up. But if you must back up, what don't you do? Don't back into a blind spot. If you don't know what's backing, what must you do? Get out and look. Now, backup cameras have helped. Well, I can tell you an awful story about a grandfather who backed over his own grandson a few years ago in my neighborhood. What would that man do right now to get out of the law? You know what I'm saying. Everybody knows what I'm saying. In other words, you can't back into a blind spot. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can roll the windows down. You can sound the horn, right? If you have a spotter, somebody can help you out. But if you don't have those things, you got to get out of the law. If you ever notice with utility, when you see utility vehicles, phone company, gas company, whatever, when they get out of their vans or their trucks, what do they put behind the rear bumper? They put a cone. Now, why is that cone in? Well, part of that is more visibility, right? That's somewhat obvious. But it also requires them to go get that cone. By going and getting that cone, they look behind you. Particularly be cautious around pulling into people's driveways. Some of you have to pick people up at their home. So you pull down into their driveway, you help Mrs. Jones into the vehicle. What if you lost track of what's going on behind your vehicle? And things can change. All of a sudden there's kids back there playing. You don't know that. If you're in a parking lot at a supermarket, while you're going down, a car pulled up right behind you, and you jump in, you look in your mirrors, you can't see that car. So always take a little extra caution when backing up. At what speed can a bus hydroplane? Hydroplaning means the tread of the tires gets filled up with water? 30 miles an hour, as low as 30 miles an hour. Last night was a really good example of that, if you were out driving last night. I drove down here last night about 8 o'clock or so, and it was just, what they say, dodge mechanics. I mean, it was boring. And I gotta be honest with you, most people didn't slow down. Most people acted like none of that was going on. And what they didn't realize was their tread was now filled up with water. What's that? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? Right, when I go to stop, I'm riding on top of the water. So my stopping distance is going to be greatly magnified. So I need to slow down. In other words, that goes back to defensive driving. Preventing accidents regardless of what? Conditions. The conditions have changed, I have to change. The weather's changed, I have to change. The lighting's changed, I have to change. The road conditions have changed, I have to change. Too often, the non-professional driver, the offensive driver, they don't make any changes when things change. Day and night, they don't make any changes. We're going to talk about day and night in a little bit. If you turn this over real quick, we'll finish these real quick. I'll flip these right. How do you know when you are in another driver's blind spot?
Can't see the mirrors.
All right, you can't see the mirrors. If it's a truck, you can't see the outside mirrors. If it's a car, you can't see the inside mirrors. Most people who are driving do not check their outside mirrors. Most non-professional drivers, the only mirror they possibly ever look at is the rear view mirror. So if you can't see that rear view mirror, they're not sure you're there. What's your organization's policy on communication devices, such as cell phones? What's the policy? Don't use it. What's that mean? Well, let me talk about when you're driving. So don't use it would mean I can't do this. Right? That's what that means. But I can put it on vibrate, tuck it under my leg, and with it vibrates, I can look at it. I'm not using it, right? Well, if I'm at a red light, I can text my wife, right? I'm not using it. I'm at a red light. I'm stopping. You get where I'm going with that. What's happening is most of the policies that were written around me were written, frankly, before they were smartphones. That's back when this was your only option. What are your options? What else can I do in this way? Text? Anything else? I can watch a movie on it. I can play games on it. I can get on World Wide Web on it. I can read my email. Get where I'm going with that. Oh, I'm not using my phone. I'm not doing this. So have a real understanding of what it means. More companies now are saying, here's the new policy. You can't use this unless you're in park. Some people will stop there, and some people will say in park outside the vehicle. Now, I'll let your company decide that. That's not my job to decide your company. But I would say at a minimum, you don't use this unless you're in park. And that's how I would simply make it that simple. If the vehicle is in park, what's happening? I'm not driving, right? So think about that a little bit. I don't for a moment think you're driving down the road doing this. I don't think any of you are doing this. I think a lot of you are doing this. I really do. Why do I think that? Because I see it all the time. So give some thought to that. Because here's the problem. When I use my phone, when that phone just lit up, what just happened? This phone just sent a signal out to AT&T. It says I'm using it, and that's now documented. The moment I hit this phone and turn it on, and then if I go to the next step and I open it up, that's documented. And then if I go to the phone apparatus and I start looking at things, that's documented. They're going to know I'm using this phone. And I'll say, oh no, I wasn't talking on it. It won't matter. It won't matter. I was using my phone. So give some thought to it. What is the most hazardous situation on your route? Well, now some of you have particularly hazardous areas you go into. Maybe you have no berm, maybe you're in an area that has a lot of curves. Intersections is what we're looking for. The most dangerous place you can drive on a daily basis is intersections. Intersections account for more than 50% of all traffic accidents and only account for about 3% of driving time. In other words, we spend about 3% of our time driving through intersections, but about 50% of our accidents happen in intersections. Okay, a few more questions. Stick with me. We'll take a break. What should you do when you have a tailgater? Slow down, increase your following distance, pull over if necessary. What does the term move over law mean to you as a bus driver? Move over means if there's an emergency vehicle on the right side of the highway with its lights on, that's important. An emergency vehicle with its lights on, you must either move over one lane or reduce your speed to under 20 miles an hour. There's an emergency vehicle on the right side of the road. Complete the following sentence. Even in daylight hours, when my windshield wipers are on, I should what? Headlights. Windshield wipers and headlights should always go together. Why? Because once your wipers come on, that means visibility has been reduced. Once visibility has been reduced, you want to do everything possible to increase visibility. Not necessarily, because even during the day, they say, well, that doesn't help me see better. No, it helps other people see you better. And that's important. What are some of the hazards of driving in adverse conditions such as night and fog? Limited visibility. Anytime your visibility is reduced. By the way, at night, your peripheral vision, your side vision, gets reduced by about 80 to 85%. That's why we see most pedestrian strikes at night and most animal strikes at night. In the day, you're driving through one of these wonderful roads, and there's Bambi. Oh, look over there. Look over there. There's that little deer over there, right? You see it over there. When do you see it at night? Right? You didn't see it over there. So what should we do at night? Just as one example. Slow down. Period. You know, when the United States designed the highway system, you go to the Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and see the sign. The original speed limit signs had daytime speed limit, nighttime speed limit. That was common. That was, I mean, we knew this stuff 70 years ago. We don't see as well at night. We must slow down at night. There have been experts that have written up studies that say if we can reduce traffic speed at night by 10 miles an hour, we might reduce accidents by 50%. Just that little act. And we would reduce pedestrian strikes tremendously. When we see about 90% of all people who get hit by moving vehicles, it happens at night. Guys, look around this room right now. Did you bring a change of clothes with you? Nope. No. Did you bring a change of clothes with you? Why am I pointing at certain people? Did you bring a change of clothes with you? What's going to happen to him at night with that dark shirt? He's not going to see it at night. Now, for this gentleman, we can see it, right? But it's true. In other words, we don't think about that. I don't have a separate set of clothes, but if I'm walking tonight in these dark colors, I'm not going to be seen. And so what you need to do is reduce your speed. And that applies to fog, that applies to any weather condition. If the road conditions change, the weather conditions change, you must reduce your speed. And then we talked about covering the brake. Covering the brake reduces reaction time. So some quick reminder points. When traveling in ideal conditions, best answer. B. Your following distance should be at least 4 seconds. You should assume you're in another person's blind spot. C. You do not see in the car's rearview mirror. You should check your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds in adverse weather conditions. A. You should increase your following distance. A preventable collision is one in which the driver failed to do everything reasonable to prevent it. And that's sort of what you have to live under. My job is to prevent accidents regardless of conditions or regardless of reaction time. And with that, let's take a 10-minute break and go outside and get some fresh air. Woo.